Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this candid discussion. Please know we will open the chat in about 40 minutes to take questions. I am Christopher Miller, Senior Director of Education and Community Engagement here at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. There's a long storied legacy of law and order in this country, and often it has not been aligned with peace and justice. Let us not forget that slavery, black codes, and Jim Crow was law and order in this country. They were violent systems that promoted racism and were void of any authentic principles of peace or justice. Hence, when we often reflect on the legacy of enforcement, we think of stories like Samuel Burris, a free black man arrested and sentenced to be enslaved in 1837 for helping enslaved folks to freedom. Being a conductor of the Underground Railroad was unlawful. You may think of the 300 black men of Cincinnati who were rounded up by gunpoint by the police in 1862 and forced to do fatigue duty to protect Cincinnati from Confederate forces. Or you may think of John Lewis, who we just lost, who was arrested by law enforcement 45 times, beaten near death by police officers. Or you may think of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the many others who have been victims of police violence. The truth is, there is a history of criminalization of blackness and it has been systemically entrenched into our culture. So what can we do? Well, what can be done to increase the peace and justice? I'm joined here today with members of law enforcement. Joining us for this candid conversation is Sergeant Anthony Mitchell with the Cincinnati Police Department, Lieutenant Chantia Pearson with the Cincinnati Police Department, Retired Lieutenant Steve Kramer, historian at the Greater Cincinnati Police Museum, Major Earl Price with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, and Fred Gilmer, a police academy instructor. Thank you all for joining us here today. According to data USA compiled for 2018, there were approximately 796,000 police officers in the US with an average age of 39.5. 85.3% of the police officers were male. 66.5% of the police officers were white, non-Hispanic. Hence, while white males make up 1/3 of the US population, the vast majority of law enforcement officers are white males. So I ask all of you, beginning with Lieutenant Pearson, why did you choose a career in law enforcement?
It wasn't really a choosing, it was a calling. I grew up in Price Hill, Winton Terrace, College Hill. Quite frankly, I hated the police. I did not have any positive interactions with them growing up as youth. They arrested my grandmother when I was 12 for not signing a citation, but the way that they came and policed my community, I had no respect for them. And then, my mom and my grandmother would talk to me about it, and they said, well, if you can't beat them, join them and be the change. And so here I am. I've been working with them since 2002 in some capacity. I started as a cadet, and now I'm here as a police lieutenant, rose through the ranks. And now I have a much broader understanding of the job that we do and also what it feels like to be Black and blue and growing up here in Cincinnati.
Thank you. Sergeant Mitchell?
Mine actually played out just a little bit different. I always had a goal and dreams of being a fireman. This was actually my backup plan. However, once I took this exam, the road to this was so much faster than what my goal was. So I knew that God was putting me where he wanted me to be. And I had a few interactions with law enforcement growing up, and I just knew that God was putting me somewhere, and he took me through those situations so that he could use me on this end, so I could have an impact on those negative interactions, so that other people wouldn't have to go through some of the things that I went through.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Kramer, I know you're retired, but you're continuing to work through the Greater Cincinnati Police Museum. If you could share with us your reasons for getting involved or choosing a career in law enforcement.
My dad was a cop, and I wanted to be a Marine aviator, but then they found out I was colorblind. I couldn't do that. So I was already in the process to be a police cadet, and I passed that process and joined at 17 years old. And then 38 and a half years later, I retired as a police lieutenant. I enjoyed it so much that I continued on in the police museum. I feel like I'm giving back to society and still working at it.
Thank you, thank you. And Major Price.
Basically, I was pretty much scared of the police as I was growing up in the inner cities of Cincinnati, and just some of the things that I saw officers do to young black males actually pretty much got to me. And I'll never forget the riots of the 60s when we had the National Guard and they were rolling down the street. And I'll never forget, I was living on Eaton Avenue at the time. And they actually put out martial law at the time, and you could be shot after a certain time period. And they didn't care who you were. That was out without warning. So then when I ventured through the school system here in Cincinnati, just some of the things that I saw, it did not empower me as a student, as an individual. And I saw a lot of kids act out unnecessarily. So when I got into the 12th grade, I decided that I want to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so I am glad that I can say 35 years later that I haven't solved all the problems of the world, but I'm still hitting at it though.
Thank you, thank you. And lastly, Officer Gilmer.
You know, I think being a police officer is a calling. I felt that growing up in high school, I never forget, I thought that I had the perfect personality when it comes to dealing with conflict. People would get into altercations. I'd always had the calm head in the situation. And I said, I could see myself doing this for a living. I actually ended up taking criminal justice at West Virginia State College there, and right outside of Charleston, West Virginia, and enjoyed it so much that I started looking for a police position right after graduation and ended up in Cincinnati. And my mother always wanted me to be a teacher. She was a teacher. And I ended up at the police academy. So I got to do a little bit of both, instructing and still have a badge at the same time. So it's kind of worked out well. I enjoy doing what I do, trying to be that image and teaching things. After 21 years, I still have a lot to learn. And I think it's been a great ride. So, yep, that is exactly what I expected.
Well, certainly I thanked all of you before we got on camera, and I will thank you once again for participating in this candid conversation. We've been the convener of complicated, critical conversations. We continue to be. Law enforcement, the state of law enforcement, the legacy of law enforcement can be a complicated discussion, but this is a place for us to have candid, honest conversation, the time that is needed for us to have this conversation. And so I kind of want to begin because we're here in the Grand Hall at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. And so I think the history is important. We value history. We understand its role in empowering us and in enlightening us. At the Greater Cincinnati Police Museum, it is a museum that preserves and interprets more than 10,000 law enforcement artifacts and archives and researches the history of more than 160 local, township, county, state, and federal law enforcement agencies serving some 600 documented communities, becoming the only regional law enforcement museum in the world, and it's right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so, Lieutenant Kramer, can you enlighten us on the origins of policing in Cincinnati, as well as its intersection with matters of race?
Sure. The law enforcement started in this brand new country starting in 1787, when the Constitution was passed by Congress, and then 1788 it was ratified. And in that Constitution was a thing called the militia in Article 8. At the same year, in December of 1788, we had our first presidential election, and coincidentally, we had our landing at Lisanville. This area was the first city formed under the new Constitution. When the first Congress convened in 1789, they started working on the Bill of Rights, and then the president took office in April of 1789, and then we had the Northwest Territory in August of 1789, and then we had the 12 amendments introduced into the for the Constitution. Only 10 got passed, as you know. We had the Bill of Rights in 1791, which included the Second Amendment and also some clarification of the militia. And then in 1792, we had further clarification when the second Congress actually declared that the militia or law enforcement, according to Article 8, was every male white free man. It was specified as white, and that becomes important later. We're still under martial law because it's a Northwest Territory, but in 1803, we become a state. And when we become a state, the military can't be in a state doing martial law anymore. So Cincinnati has to come up with some law enforcement. They looked at the federal law enforcement and found out that it included the militia as the law enforcement for federal crimes. So they created almost an identical law in 1803, March 29, 1803, creating every single male citizen. It did not specify white or black. But as you know, with the black laws, couldn't be a slave, but it could be a freed black man who was on the night watch, and they would do a rotation through every single citizen would stand night watch, 12 each night, except the mayor. Mayor, of course, was a judge. So they started paying that guard in 1818, and then we became a city in 1819 and took on the Juncta Jubant motto, which is very important to this area, and why one of the reasons we have a regional police museum is because our concept of working together to get things done. And of course, in 1834 to 1842, we had the race riots and slavery riots and anti-slavery riots and breaking up of presses, abolitionist presses. 1846, we had our first detectives, private detectives. In 1850, council adopted a police department, which took it out of the hands of the citizens and put it in the hands of the government. Of course, we had 1860, the Civil War, and then in 1862, the United States allowed African Americans into the militia, and of course, then the local military started using African Americans in the military. 1870, we had a statute regulating vigilantes. There were actually vigilantes was a good thing around the rural areas. And then in 1872, we have our first report of a black Cincinnati patrolman, but we've never been able to nail it down. And your historian has been helping with that, and we still haven't been able to do it. But we do have a documented black patrolman in 1884. And then in 1886, we went to a nonpartisan police department where we picked all police officers based on intelligence and physical attributes and things like that. We had our first black police detective in 1889, J.A. Allen. We had our first police woman, first female on the police department in 1945, so we're talking 50 years later. And then our first black policewoman, Lillian Grigsby, came on in 1947. We had our first black sergeant in 1949, first supervisor. And then because of Lillian Grigsby, which is an interesting story if you want to get into it later, we ended up with our District 4, which is where we put all the black patrolmen, was desegregated by the police chief. And then 1972, the last major act regarding race was the affirmative action set in. And then, of course, since then, we've had black lieutenants, including Tia. We've had black captains, black assistant chiefs, and now we've had 2 black chiefs.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving that cliff notes as far as the history. One of the things I want to go back to, I know that over Officer Gilmer's shoulder is the ragging on, and one of the panels we talk about the 1804 Black codes, and I think that's very important to have the perspective that Ohio was the first state in the Northwest Territory. And so it was a state before any of the other states that we call now the Midwest. But one of the things that was enacted into law were those Black codes, a different set of laws based on race. And I think that in many scholars' opinions, that sets the standards for a different set of standards and laws based on race. And so my question goes to, from this history question, how is this information about, especially for all of you that are serving here in Cincinnati, how much of this history have you been able to gain intentionally through your specific careers? And I will begin that with Sergeant Mitchell, if you could weigh in.
So a lot of our history actually is taught in our police academy once you get in there. I know that Lieutenant Pearson, I was hoping she would have went first. She actually was on board and kind of spearheaded a segment in our in-service training, which we attend yearly. And it took every officer, they took every officer to a trip to the museum to kind of review over our history. So I'm actually going to bump this question to her or Officer Gilmer.
Thank you. Lieutenant Pearson, if you could weigh in. I think your mute button.
So it's a common saying that if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And being the first female Black sergeant that was employed full-time at the academy, they used to have adjunct instructors come in, but I was the first there that was employed and assigned there full-time. I knew that, we had to make some changes. And so while we did learn about our museum prior to me in the academy, I felt like it was another thing to go ahead and walk the department through our police history museum so that we can understand culturally what we were up against internally and externally. It was really rewarding. At the time, a lot of officers have forgotten some of their history, and I did this. I think this was back in 2017 or 18, so when we embarked on this. And just seeing how rewarding that was, I actually, you already know, our attempts to use this facility as well as the next part to build upon. But this history that we learned about the department, it really, it gave me a sense of pride in my badge. Now, I know we were dealing with a sign of the times in terms of slavery and how Black officers and Black citizens were treated, but I felt more of an honor to actually be a police officer in Cincinnati, knowing that at some point, there were people here who stood together, arm in arm, saying, hey, we need to make a change. It was some police chiefs that were ridiculed. It was police captains and lieutenants that was ridiculed for a lot of the changes that they were making. And so the ridicule that I faced was nothing in comparison to learning history and the stuff that people who came before me went through. And now moving forward, we do embark on teaching parts of history in our police academy class. I'm no longer assigned there, so I'll turn it over to Fred, but I definitely am a strong proponent. I was an advocate for when I went down there, because we have to tell police officers, we have to let them know about the communities they serve, how they came to be, why they are impoverished, why there's mental health. We have to actually teach and talk about our the people we serve. In order to serve, you have to know who you're serving and what they're about. So I'll turn it to Fred though.
Sorry about that. When you're talking about history, you got different levels. I enjoy the fact that we had an opportunity to go to the police museum, which was awesome. A lot of people didn't realize we even had one. That's how powerful that was. So the other aspect is we got a lot of officers, and I'll get more in depth with the police academy, but who are not from Cincinnati. And so just having an idea on the population makeup of Cincinnati, understanding how policing is enforced here in this area of the country. Myself is from the East Coast, understanding Midwest on how these neighborhoods were transformed, where the African American communities are. All these things we try to implement when the police academy is started and we have recruits in those seats. So I think, of course, more important is understanding the community, right? Understanding African American history is still a challenge, and I'd love to go more in depth on that. But again, history is important, right? History is important.
I do have
Absolutely.
one comment just on that as well. And I see Iris kind of throwing in her comments as we go through and talking about the collaborative. I am always going to promote the positive work that we do here in Cincinnati. We do tremendous work when it comes to law enforcement and community engagement. There is so much history within the Sentinel Police Organization, the FOP, just within that togetherness there on trying to work together, but also making sure we keep that checks and balances there. Also with the collaborative, it took a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of effort to get those type of things in place, but that just shows our progress and where we started and where we're going. I always hone on to our history not repeating itself, but also tell the community and us as law enforcement, this is kind of like a marriage. We got to keep in the fight. We're not always doing everything perfect. Things weren't perfect in the end, but we got to keep on the fight.
Well, I will say, we value history here, and if we can be a way in to affecting improvements when it comes to law enforcement and the relationships between the communities, we definitely are invested in doing so. What I want to do here is, I know we are a national institution, so we might have people that are chiming in from outside of the greater Cincinnati area. And so I would like to get your perspective, but to speak broadly when we talk about law enforcement. One of the things, and I made allude to earlier, was John Lewis. And it is well documented, him being a victim of police violence during those times when he was protesting. He, in his address in Washington in 1963, he talked about police brutality. And from the Rodney King beating in 1991 that I witnessed as a teen to the killing of George Floyd, there's a catalog of images of police officers brutalizing Black men and women. And so, Sergeant Mitchell, I'm going to begin with you, and I'm going to open up for everyone to respond. But how do you feel as a member of law enforcement when you see these images of the brutalization of Black men and women that we've seen throughout the country?
It hurts. There's no other way to put it. Because I know how many officers that I work with, along with myself, that come in day to day and work hard to try to make sure that we strive to maintain our legitimacy as an organization, that we strive to build our community relations. And for an incident that happened exactly 702 miles away to affect us and impact us as an organization, it hurts. We miss time with our families. We missed family events. Granted, yes, the community had a reason to be upset. It was wrong. Anytime you sit on a person's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds is wrong. But the only thing I encourage the community to do, and this is something we've worked here in Cincinnati, and we have policies in place to where we're not even allowed to leave a person laying on the ground in a prone position once they're handcuffed, and we put them into custody. It's get them up, and let's get them either in a car or get them some medical attention. There's no reason why he should have been on the ground for that long. And the officers that I work with have all admitted, I've not heard one person try to justify it. So it hurts.
Anyone is free to weigh in into that response as far as your feelings when you see these images of law enforcement, committing violent acts towards civilians.
So it's twofold. It's twofold for me. It ain't. I'm Tia first. I'm Tia. I'm a black female first. I'm black. That I have black brothers, black friends. My child's father's black, like black cousins. My father's black. Like, so when I see that, like, it just hurts as a me being a black female. Like, especially when it's like senseless. In terms of law enforcement, I get pissed because it's cops like that make my job harder and the jobs of officers that's around this region who are doing great things. It's officers like that just continues to fuel the division. I know you said focus broad though, Chris, but sometimes it's hard to do that because I don't live broad. We only got a certain amount of energy to work with, a certain level of things we could do. And so I am about impact and change locally. And I didn't live during those times when I was young, during those times when, since CPD had a history of having a lot of unarmed encounters, unarmed black men, and being shot and killed. So it hurts. It's twofold for me, but I'm gonna tell you what hit home the most though, Chris. Every time I open my email and we up to almost 50 homicides of male blacks killing male blacks. I hate it when the police do it, and it's a double whammy when I see it when we do it to ourselves. So it's not easy.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. I know one of the things is that often crime and violence within the same ethnicity is often raised, and when it comes to black people, it's black on black crime. But I will say that statistics show, I'm sorry, I can't speak right now, 85% of whites are killed by whites. And so it's the science and research that people commit harm and brutality towards those individuals who look like them. But it is impactful for the black community. I do want to talk about accountability when something like this happens and what is the process. But I kind of want to shift a little bit to the training. We talked a little bit about the history, but I want to talk about training and preparation. And I'm going to ask if Officer Gilmer can start this conversation off. But I will begin with saying that, according to data USA compiled in 2018, I look for they said that as far as in regard to higher education choices for police officers, the Department of Education and Census Bureau states that most common degree for police officers, for those that have a degree, is in protective services at 41.8%. It's second to business, which is 14.2%, followed by social sciences at 12%. So the question is, to begin this conversation, what is actually required training and preparation in becoming a police officer?
That's a great question. when you're talking about education, you just need a high school education. But in reality, we actually have, most people who come into the police department or police academy have at least some college experience, right? 2 years or more. We've had quite a few who have masters, and that's not uncommon now. You're talking about competitive position, you know, thousands who apply and only 45 seats that are available. You don't have to have a lot of college, but I would have to say, along with education, you have military experience. So if either you were in full-time or you were in the reserve, that helps to have some idea of structure, because we are a semi-military department, right? And so when it's following orders and such, that is not that difficult when you're coming into the academy, as far as being in shape as well. So that goes right into physical fitness, physical agility. There is no age limit. You used to have an age limit. So you can be walking in the door at 50. If you can do the exercise, you can do the PT and take the test and pass all the qualifications that are necessary. Things I think have changed a lot when you're talking about technology. You know, our classes have changed. We're allowing individuals to come in with laptops and take notes. It's just like a college experience, going through 6 months, which you have to do 6 months of the program. And I don't know if there's much.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question, and I allow anyone to chime in with this. You know, I would say, to a follow-up to that, you know, police officers are, their responsibility, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to enforce the law as their civic responsibility. And they are part of the criminal justice system. However, everyone else within that system, lawyers, prosecutors, judicial positions, have to have their substantial educational experience and extensive experience professionally to obtain those positions. So do you see a need for a change or some type of reform when it comes to the initial training and classes for police academies, or just to those requirements? Because, you know, they are enforcing the law. And so what are your thoughts as far as that? Should the requirements be more?
Can I say something real quick? Education is great. I'm never going to talk about that. You always got to have something to grow on. This is law enforcement. This is a special calling. You have to have the right heart. You have to have the right mentality. No classroom is going to teach you how to treat people. This is not brain surgery. You treat people how you would like to be treated. That's not coming out of any university. And one thing that I just need from the community more is be very careful and put the pressure on these police departments on who you give this type of authority to. It takes a special person to do this job. So you have to make sure that you observe and make your background investigations even more in depth. And that's my only piece, or my only spill on that. And I'm sorry if I went on a little bit of a rant, but a classroom is not going to tell you the heart of a man or a woman. Treat people with dignity and respect. It'll take you a long way.
I'd like to spin off on that.
Please, Major Price.
You know, officers need to look at ourselves. That's what we need to do. We need to stop. We need to think. We need to listen and learn the heartbeat of the people that we serve. And I totally agree. It's all about that individual. Background checks are important. Psychologicals may help as well. But to get to the heart of an individual, based on a calling, you got to realize and know, why are they getting in this profession in the first place? And that's really, really difficult from time to time to find out why they got in this profession. I got in this profession because I want to do some good. I really, really want to do a lot of good, and I'm still that way. I'm committed to that. But it's really hard now because you're finding people that are just going from job to job, and you're trying to find the right person for this profession. It takes a certain type of individual, as I said before, to actually do this job. You got to have a lot of heart, a lot of common sense. You got to have some smarts too. So you got to have a balance between education and common sense. And we have found, and I'm sure that all the other people on this, officers on this panel will attest to, that if you're the kind of individual, okay, that have gone through life, gone through the thick of it, so to speak, then you can identify with people a little bit better because maybe you've gone down that path. And not saying that that's all inclusive, absolute, but it sure helps. And I know with my upbringing, it helped me in dealing with people. You got to have humble people that are attracted to this profession, and people that want to be, that this is just like to lock into people, like to deal with people, treat people with respect. You know, the golden rule: put yourself in someone else's shoes. That's really what it's all about. It's really easy, but you got to respect people. You got to respect humanity, but first you got to love yourself.
Well, let me ask this question to kind of continue this conversation. I know that I think it might be sometimes difficult to, as Major Price said, to identify someone's heart, and so forth. So that vetting process, I don't have the answers to. I don't know what that is. But when you get someone in that says that does not have the right heart in this position, how is the culture being cultivated in law enforcement to make sure that those individuals are no longer in that career if they do not have the heart and the right intentions? Where's the accountability factor at? And you mentioned the collaborative agreement. I know that is part of it, but you know, is this something that goes from department to department? Is it something that should be federal? How can we have greater accountability and greater justice when there are the inappropriate people in these positions? And I believe Sergeant Mitchell, I think you look like you have a response to that.
I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up, but let some other people speak. But I think me and Lieutenant Pearson are looking at each other because we both serve time in our internal investigation section. That's the thing. When you have officers that you know that are here for the right reason, doing a good job, you put them in the positions to where they can hold their peers accountable. I served 5 years. I know she served some time in internal prior to me. That's what you do. You hold your peers accountable, and you have the checks and balances. That's why our internal investigation section is there.
And I'm gonna say this. So I'm known to be long-winded, so I promise you I'm gonna be short. But I gotta go back to your last question where you talked about training. You forgot to add politicians to the list. Politicians make the laws. Laws essentially have been completely unjust. Officers are the people who have discretion on how we enforce them, and so we cannot exclude politicians from part of this criminal justice system because they even exercise what type of laws I can enforce. You don't see me arresting nobody for Medicaid, but you see me arresting people for theft. So you do need some, I do agree with form of education. You do have to have love. You do have to have some type of social and cultural competency skills. And there are so many different tests and Richter scales to be able to grade people on. But if I want this job where I could have the ability to take somebody's life, man, put people in the thick of it before we allow them to graduate. You feel me? It needs to be more interaction between citizens and the community. But I'll go into that when you talk about ways to progress. But I just had to say, like, politicians at the top of that, you know, because it's a capitalistic country. The second thing, when he's talking about how you have more accountability, we got contracts in place. And don't get me wrong, I've been in my situations where I needed it, but I made mistakes to the heart. And my heart is in the right place. There could definitely be more accountability measures. It could definitely be more show and prove. I mean, you got people who make what we make in the business world who have complete measurements in place along the way. They have process improvement plans. Like, that's the type of stuff that we need. Then there's also in terms of, it's so many accountability measures, and the collaborative agreement pushes to do that, but we are trying to push a culture to do that and to get officers to see why it's important. Like he said, though, being an internal, you got a lot. I understand this, y'all. We are really having this conversation about 10% of our people. 90% of the population, great. 90% of Cincinnati Police Department, police officers, great. We're really having this conversation on how to control the 10%. 90% of citizens, great. 10% just got these issues, you know what I mean? And so we do need to put our resources there, but I also think we need to put more resources in empowering the good people that are around us so that they can speak up. And the last part about holding officers accountable, you as citizens, I'm a cop, and it's gonna suck to say, but when you file a citizen's complaint, come sit at the table. Come sit at the table. Don't just file a complaint. Tell me what the officer did. I investigate. I may find that the officer is wrong or right, and I send you a piece of paper back telling you that the officer was wrong or right. No, let's have some conversation and dialogue, you see, because I can speak for you, but I can only go so far. I'm like a parent right now. Like, I'm like their big sister. I'm part of the family. But you sitting across from the table for them, telling them how you feel, and them telling you what you thought, that's how you form relationships, and that's how you make a change, and that's how you begin to hold officers accountable. We all have a part to play in this. I'm gonna stop, because you know I get passionate.
And I'm sorry, it's just the passion coming out, Chris. But she's hitting it on the nose, and the community has to realize it. The community, you vote your elected officials in. Your elected officials hire your city manager. Your city manager hires the police chief. Your police chief is what puts your policies and procedures in place.
So it comes back down to voting. And this is a critical year. It comes down to voting your elected officials and having the understanding of how that trickled down into all these other systems. Absolutely. I know that we're going to open up and take some questions that's been in the chat, but I want to ask this last question before I get to this. And Major Price, I'm going to ask you to chime in because I saw your face. You were down here and you made statements. A few weeks ago, the Hamilton County Commissioner announced a resolution outside of our doors, making racism a public health crisis. And so my question is, what is the role in law enforcement in addressing systemic racism internally and externally? Since you were there to make a statement and to talk about that, and we do recognize that this is a public health crisis.
Yes, without a doubt, it's definitely a public health crisis. And actually, I'm in the process of implementing what is called the EPIC program. Ethical Police is Courageous. It actually comes out of New Orleans. Actually, we were giving this permission by Commissioner Parks in conjunction with Sheriff Neal to implement this training. EPIC is actually based on peer intervention among police officers and supervisors. See something, say something. You better say something. If your fellow officer is about to do something wrong or in the process of doing something bad, regardless of rank, officers will have permission to get physical with another officer if needed or if it's justified. We want you to be able to step in and do something instead of sitting back and just watching or trying to ignore the situation. This training is scheduled to start actually in September with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, and it will definitely encompass all of our employees. Externally, officers and supervisors will serve all communities, and because with the Sheriff's Office, everyone knows that we cover a lot of the suburbs and some aspects of the city as well. But it's all about having respect and dignity for the people that you serve. We want officers to actually get involved in their communities and talk with them, learn from them, instead of just responding on a radio call. Get involved in the communities. And we want equality amongst all people. That's really what we're about. We want our officers to attend meetings and civic organizations and get involved in the schools and learn to talk to the teachers and see what's going on with the kids and identify who the parents are. It's all about bringing everybody together, actually, and that's what these young kids and that's what people in these communities need to see. They need to see everyone working cooperatively together and just form a family, because we're all in this together. You know, it's not about police being more powerful than everyone else. It's all about us working together. That's really what this is all about. And I think, I really believe, I don't think, I really believe that if you launch this kind of campaign, then it'll actually eliminate the systemic racism. It's a part of it. It's our contribution within Hamilton County. We're also including implicit, explicit bias training as well, crisis intervention training. We're going to be doing that year round. And we want our officers to get engaged, but it's not going to be an easy road. And I realize that, because we're going to have to get a buy-in. But actually, I've been checking the pulse of our department, our office, and our officers, for the most part, they're saying, yeah, this is something that we think we need to tackle it, be involved in, because they don't want to wind up on the news. They don't want to wind up being arrested, and no one wants a bad image. And the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office has been very, very fortunate up to this point. We truly have. And but you just never know. You're going to have that few percentile of people, of officers, that might go bad. And we want to make sure that they're put in check before they even think about doing something wrong.
Is there synergy between departments? You know, you have the sheriff department, you have Cincinnati Police Department, you have Coleraine Township, you have all these township police, you know, different agencies. Is there synergy between these departments when we talk about systemically making changes?
There is a Ohio, it is a Hamilton County Police Chiefs Association, where different police chiefs and representatives from around this particular region get together. But I'm going to venture to say, Cincinnati Police Department, we did open up our training to other agencies so that we can garner more consistency. But I would just love to be a part of the shift and change, because sometimes we bore the brunt of how people get treated in other agencies, right? Like I've been mistreated by Forest Park, Springdale. I've had them file complaints on me. We get mistreated in other areas and we bring it here, but it's like, if we can all be consistent across the board in terms of what we're doing, especially here locally in our region, I think it could get better. So there's not this, for me, in my personal opinion, there's not the synergy that I think it should be, but I'm also not at the Police Chiefs Association to make that determination. I'm still in control. So.
I think Lieutenant Kramer has a comment also.
Yes, Lieutenant Kramer, please.
Yes, it's interesting to bring it up, because the program that we just had that they talked about before, bringing in all the police officers to the police museum, I designed that program. We generally designed it around that junk to juvant idea that we talked about before. This is the only area in the entire United States, probably the world, where every single law enforcement office, every single law enforcement agency has worked together seamlessly, almost, at least since 1937 and probably since 1920, when they had a thing called police committee. And this includes both sides of the river. We have a Hamilton County Police Association since 1937. We have a mutual aid for every single law enforcement agency. We have had several times different police academies that were for the entire county of Hamilton. We have meetings, sometimes investigative supervisors meetings that include 8 counties, again, including across the river. Our police museum, the reason we have 8 counties is because we couldn't possibly come up with a police museum that covers all of the history just using one police department, even just the Cincinnati Police Department. We all work together. We've always worked together, and we do it on, it just doesn't happen anywhere else in the United States. It doesn't even happen in Warren County. In Hamilton County, we have one law enforcement database, and every single law enforcement agency, and at one time there were 57 of them, contribute to that law enforcement database. We have mutual training. We have, we all respond to robberies, bank robberies, exactly the same way. And yes, we have gone through many different things, and I think the HCPA, Hamilton County Police Association, needs to reignite some of that fervor for this kind of working together for the same kinds of training and same kind of processes. But we do it better than anybody else, and we end up with law enforcement that outshines everybody in the United States, as bad as some of it has been.
Thank you.
I would
I
like,
know. Yes.
I would like
Yes,
to
Officer
say,
Gilman.
yeah, early on in this conversation, we talked about systemic racism. I think that that's the word racism are words which we avoid, right? And I think that conversation needs to be had. When we're talking about the police academy, we're talking about all academies nationwide. Coming in, training is the top priority. You learn policing and how to police and what to expect when you are able to engage in conversation and understanding the population that you work with. When you would ask somebody, what is racism? Does racism even exist? You know, you'll have individuals out here who could not tell you, you know, where does that come from? Understanding your history, understanding the neighborhood and why redlining exists. Why do you have neighborhoods in the way they are, right? If you don't understand your basic communication, right, there's your relationship right there. You know, what is you know, disorderly mean to you? Whereas to me and my neighbor, that's not disorderly. You know, my mother talks like that all the time. That's disorderly. Understanding the culture, right? You have to have value. And where does that come from? We have a lot of young individuals coming into the police department wanting to do good. Most people want to do good from their lens. What does that look like? How much history do you know in reference to African-American history? Do you know coming in the door, sitting in those seats? And how important is that? Going out there saying, I'm serving, knowing very little, right? And so where does that, I would love to see more of a conversation in dealing with race, right? We cannot avoid that. As tough as that conversation is, we're avoiding it, and it naturally, we veer to something else. We go to city council. How much do they know, right? How much do, and so you're basing it off of their understanding from their dynamics, right? I would say a lot of them come from the suburbs. A lot of them come from where it's a majority. Right? We're only 13%, African Americans, only 13% nationwide anyway. So I think that is key, right? And only 2% officers nationwide actually pull their gun out and actually fire, right? When you're talking about communication, you do that every single day. And it's not just word of mouth, it's body language is a part of communication as well. How you got out the car, how you approached me, you know, everything, all these things come into play. And I think that is something we need to focus more on, because when these technology has eliminated a lot of our communication, I don't have to hear your tone of voice or listen to your facial expressions anymore. I can just text it, right? And when that becomes the norm, now you're walking out into a neighborhood with that much communication under your belt. We have a lot of problems and issues. I think we need to face those things.
I'd like to chime in on that, if you don't mind, Chris. You're 100% right. And those conversations should not only take place in the classroom, but also in private too, amongst officers. And what are they talking about? You know, are they really buying in to what we're talking about here in terms of inclusiveness, you know, equality? And so if we're ever going to change, make a really, really big change, we need to have a lot of those conversations, and they need to take place more than just annually during in-service training or ultimately in the academy when you first get started. But that's the only way to actually have constructive change within the police institutions.
one of the questions that came through, and we've been having a lot of questions come through, and I apologize, we won't be able to get through them all, but I look at this as one of many conversations that need to be held. I would say it was brought up trust, building trust in the community, someone had cited. And so what are measures to do to build trust, especially when you talk about the race component of the makeup of police officers in the communities that they are serving? Is that an area where there is growth opportunities to where that trust can be built? And Sergeant Mitchell, if you could chime in.
Absolutely. So things like this. Granted, we're dealing with COVID-19 and we're kind of limited on our face-to-face contact, but this is how it starts, is the conversation. We can't know what the needs of the community is if we're not engaged in the community, and vice versa. That's how you build trust. You and I have known each other for some while. We couldn't put our faces together, but as you continue to build that conversation, you can keep it going, we start to build that trust in one another. We have got, as law enforcement, get out of this warrior mentality and get into a more guardianship mentality. We are not the parents. We're just like the big brothers or the big sisters. Yeah, we can come in and do different things and kind of solve the problem, but we're all on the same level. We all are human beings. And that's why I go back to what I said. You treat people with dignity and respect. This is not one of those things where law enforcement is here and the community is here. We are all the same. When I go home and I take this uniform off, I go to Kroger just like you. I pick my daughter up from school and take her where she needs to be just like you. We are the same.
And I think that's the thing about we see episodes in treatment where people are dehumanized, where their dignity is compromised, and so that creates that fraction. One of the questions I want to get to that was posed, and I think it says, is there a discussion about adding to training subjects like psychology and sociology and mental health, where, because you're dealing with communities that might have people within the community that deals with mental health issues. How is the training in law enforcement in regards to those matters?
We do mental health training, so it's a week training. It's 40 hours, but we also incorporate that throughout the academy, throughout scenarios. I'm not down there, so I thought Fred would take the question. But in terms of making training a lot, we already do mental health. First of all, understand we're a microcosm of the community. We got our own mental health issues too, right? And so when we talk about PTSD, when we talk about crisis-informed trauma, like we're talking about that across the board, because like he said, I mean, I'm a mom, I got a Black son. You don't think that I'm impacted sometimes as he's this cute little kid that may grow to be, feared someday. Like, I mean, there is trauma that exists in the department, out the department. We're citizens of the community. So when we talk about mental health, crisis intervention, crisis response, trauma informed, PTSD, we do all that training. It's still gonna require relationship though, people. And when you talk about trust, we have to start changing our narrative. If we continue to give so much authority to the past, then all this work that we're doing, if you're still going to scream, we don't trust you, and people are still going to say we don't like you, what are we doing it for? We have to learn to shift our narrative based on what's actually our awareness and our presence, and come together. We have the training, we have a lot of the tools. And now we need the community, to at some point begin to believe in us and what we're doing and come along and have these race conversations.
But can I say this real quick, Chris? Mm-hmm. And this is where we as law enforcement went wrong. And I know this might not be properly said, but we got caught with our pants down. And I bring this up because in having a conversation with a member of the community, they said, why does it take for something like this to happen for you all to start promoting and showing us what it is that you all do positive. We need to take the effort and the time to show the community what it is that we continuously do year round, so that this isn't just coming out when something goes wrong. We have a cadet program that goes year round. We have a city camp that goes year round. We have SROs in the school that engage our children and our young people year around, but the average citizen doesn't know that, because we as a police department need to do a better job on self-promoting ourselves and making ourselves better accessible. So those are things that we have to work on, and we have to take that. So just as much as, you know, we bounce this back and forth, we got to look at ourselves, and I'm a part of the community. I can say it. We as a community got to look at ourselves as well. We have to do it. It's a growing process, but we all got to be able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, you're right, I'll take that. Constructive criticism. Let's work together.
Well, let me ask this question, because it was brought up, and you said eloquently, you're human beings. You're no different than anyone else. And we want to recognize the humanity in everyone. But we also want to identify there seems to be appearance of different standards when you do wear the badge, and how the consequences are for you. For instance, if I was to break into a home and shoot a woman, i.e. Breonna Taylor, I'm going to jail. I'm getting arrested. I'm not walking the street anytime soon, because I had no reason to do that. And so how can we address those standards? And I understand you have different departments. You have either, I know that is an incident that happened in another city, but we have these incidents throughout the nation, and you're in our community. So we're coming to you for answers. How can we have police officers have the same standards of accountability as citizens, and in moving forward? And I think that will build trust as well, if that is the case.
But Chris, on that Breonna Taylor, there's some complexities there that I don't know if everyone is aware of, and I'm not an expert. I wasn't there, but I will say this: that was actually based on some bad information from a confidential informant, and you can only look at the police themselves, whoever the commander was, and the police officers that went on that no-knock situation. That was just bad information. And what they should have done, they should have analyzed that situation a lot better before they even went in there. And
would you say that's bad information and bad policy by having a no-knock warrant policy?
no, it's nothing wrong with the no-knock warrant policy. That's really for safety reasons for the police officer, because some people, you still have dangerous people out there, and you have to protect. You have to protect police. You have to do that as well as the citizens. But that was a bad mistake. And based on everything that I've read, that I've heard about this situation, not knowing all the particulars on it, but it was based on bad information that they have received.
And anyone else, if you want to chime into that response? Yes.
I'd like to talk to that, Chris. Number one, you asked a question, why was it different for you if you break in and than a police officer? Well, you got to remember, as bad as it sounds, it is the job of the police officer sometimes to break in. That's what we do for the society. Sometimes we have to break into homes. And I don't know the fact pattern of that killing. It sounds like a very tragic situation. And of course, as the major said, the information was bad. And therefore, that end of the policies were bad. The Cincinnati Police Division, for instance, and because of a similar situation, although we didn't shoot the lady, we did break down the wrong door on a no-knock and ended up putting a flashbang in an old lady's apartment, and that was a terrible thing. But because of that, we changed our policies to where the undercover agent officer has to watch and actually see the confidential informant go to the apartment and make the buy before we even think about having a no-knock policy. And then the no-knock warrant has to be approved by a supervisor with when they were coming to me for this, I did quite a bit of interviewing. So yeah, that police department down there probably really needs to look at their policies, but they're not going to have a policy, do not accidentally shoot the wrong person in the wrong house, because they shouldn't have been in the wrong house in the first place. That's where the policy broke down.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
I want to do this, and I think this is what the community needs to see. And with all due respect, Lieutenant Kramer, I got to disagree with you. We're held at a higher standard. We don't get to make mistakes like that. We got to make sure our information and our intelligence is in line before we go execute a search warrant, before we make those type of moves. We got to make sure we dot all our I's and cross all our T's. We don't get those type of excuses, and that goes back to, this is a calling. This is a unique job. We are held to that standard of making sure we do what we're supposed to do. I mean, I get it. I get the policies, I get the procedures, but I do believe that this is what the community is looking for, is for us to realize that, you know, I know what the law says, but sometimes we got to look at ourselves and say, look, what we do is serious business. We don't get a chance to make a mistake like that. We got to dot our I's and cross our T's. That's just me. I'm sorry. But
He actually said that. He did.
okay, I'm
He did say
sorry.
that
I'm and you know
he
what?
was
I'll take that.
jumping
I'm
in.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just
He did say
okay.
that their policies need to be looked
I'll
at.
take
But at first
I'll
he
take
did
that.
say also that we do have to break it out. I feel you. But we, you know what, we say we know different than the community, but I'm gonna go ahead, people. We are. When I go to your house and you amped up and mad about something, I can't take that personally. I should have some level of understanding that when you come in contact with me, you just may not like me, right? And that's a badge thing. That's because of the badge. But once we have had some communication and we sitting there talking, and you see that this ain't, as we say these days, this ain't that, like that this is actually an engagement where I'm gonna treat you with respect, then I do expect the citizen to calm down. But I as law enforcement, I do believe we are held to a higher standard, and we should be. When I show up at your house, you mad or upset, or you're hurt or you're crying, my job is not to tell you to shut up. It's not to tell you to be quiet. It's actually to show you respect and let you go through that grieving process. It's to have more patience. We are up against a whole lot of circumstances that people don't know. It's like we at your house dealing with a situation and it's 8 more calls holding, right? And so sometimes we do have a tendency to rush things. But we are, at the same time, we are part of the community. We are citizens, but we are held to a higher standard, and we should expect some level of discomfort or distrust when we are on these interactions. And that's what we actually teach, you know?
But you never mind. Okay.
But also too, the other thing too is that it also goes back to what Fred said about race, is that respect to one person may not look like respect to somebody else. You actually have to have a level of understanding of the communities that you serve in order to serve them right and well. So.
Lieutenant Kramer, you look like you was about to chime in.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to agree with Anthony. I absolutely agree that we have to have a higher level in this occupation. We have to carry a gun around. We have to always have it with us. We have to pull it out. We go into dangerous situations. Cincinnati Police Department is very highly trained. They go into FATS machines, firearms training simulators, and have it out with fictitious movies and things like that. And how many times do we end up shooting an undercover police officer in a FATS simulation? I can remember one time when we did a Kelly's thing up in, we're going back in the 70s, where he actually had live people with blanks, and I survived getting through the whole hallway and found out I shot 2 police officers at the as I was doing it. So we all make mistakes, but we have to be, and somebody has to be there with a gun, and sometimes a mistake is made, and no knock. I agree with Tony that is the highest level of, you're going to go in and surprise the heck out of somebody. It better be the right somebody surprise.
And I just want to apologize for the record, Lieutenant Kramer. I heard procedure, and I'm like, here we go. So I'll take that one.
One of the things, I think we definitely want to build accountability. I believe, was that Major Price, were you about to say something, sir?
I'm just listening to some of the information coming in. And the reason we brought the information out in terms of Breonna Taylor, that's not to cover anything up by any stretch of the imagination. When you're having dialogue between two people, two groups, or whatever the situation is, things are going to come up. And we're actually being very, very open here. I'm seeing that all the panelists are putting their best foot forward. And so no one's trying to cover anything up. All right, it's all about being transparent.
Well, definitely, we were getting close to our time. This is a topic that we just can't address everything within an hour and some change. These conversations need to continue. I hope that you will continue to make yourself available to our community, the communities that you serve, so that we can have a greater relationship. I want everyone to chime in on this, because for decades, the protest chant in the streets have always been no justice, no peace. From your perspective of being part of the law enforcement community, what does justice look like? And if we could begin with Lieutenant Pearson, what does justice look like?
So it's no justice, no peace, no racist police. We gotta, it's more to it. But first of all, I think personally, it should be, we want justice, we want peace, because there's power in our words and the way we define things. But what justice looks like for me is actually the police not necessarily having their hands involved, in it's police and community coming together. People say that they don't need police. We don't need police for certain calls for service. Agree, and I disagree. Right now we have MHRT runs where we send mental health advocates, domestic violence run where we send divert advocates, and then we have the fire department respond on medical. None of these people will go in without the police going there because they fear for their safety. And so we need some type of community accountability. But when you talk about justice, it's so many levels. You got justice from the police, you got justice from the criminal justice system, you got justice in terms of the correctional system. You got justice when the person comes out. Justice when the person comes out, we need to change our laws in terms of how people are treated and their access and opportunities when they get out of prison, right? If they do the crime, they do the time, but they also do the time when they come home, right? So that is a problem. And then you got the court system charging people and convicting them disparately. And then you got the police system, like having discretion in terms of what laws and who we gonna police and stuff. There needs to be more accountability measures around that, just to make sure we're being fair and impartial when we're signing charges, and we got officer discretion in terms of what we do. So justice for me actually looks like more of the community and the police taking accountability for how we make that change. That really starts with self. Everybody's looking for a leader and a hero is in you. And so justice is accountability and facing the hard truth that you do some jacked up stuff, we do some jacked up stuff, fix it. Fix it instead of this right here. And if you have these fair and just policies, procedures, and people treating well in place, then we get to find out who the real criminals are that may just deserve to be, locked up, deserve to not be given a second chance. So more justice when we got more accountability on all ends of the spectrum, and more working together, more juke to Juvon. So.
And I open that up respectively to all of you. What does justice look like? If it's the same as Lieutenant Pearson, that's fine. But to you, what does justice look like? Major Pierce, I'll let you chime. Oh, Lieutenant Kramer, please. Proceed.
With law enforcement, we only have a small piece of the whole justice pie, as Tia just explained. On the front end, we have the people electing the people who are making the laws. On the back end, we have the courts, we have the prisons, and the other programs that try for rehabilitation. So we only really have a small piece of that pie. if we practice that small piece perfectly by looking at every single individual and every single encounter as if that person was absolutely no different than we are, and they are no different than we are, other than pigmentation in most cases, we will have done our job properly and fairly, and that includes the way they perceive us. You know, they can't have a misperception coming because it's a white officer coming to their door any more than we can have a misperception that we're going to the door of a black individual or a Mexican or anything else, any nationality or anything. We just can't make that. We can't make those distinctions. We have to treat every single person the same way, and as the Bible would tell us, how we would like to be treated. And then that's our justice that we perform, and we're doing our job the best we can when we do that.
Any of you would like to add to that before? Yes, Major Price.
Yes, you know, with the sheriff's office, we provide the jail court services division as well as enforcement. And in the jail, you have to treat all the inmates fairly. It's all about care, custody, and control. The judges, they've already sentenced them, so it's up to us to protect those inmates as well as ourselves too. In court services, it's all about providing security and control to the public as well as to the judges. And enforcement is all about serving that community and treating all communities with respect. It's all about the golden rule. And you do that, it shows, it radiates, it helps all departments. You know, we're reflective of all departments across the country with a very positive image. And that's what we need. And that's how we're going to build trust, by being consistent.
And
I believe
yes.
in trust. Trust starts with a dialogue, a conversation. I believe that, you know, these tragic incidents that have happened, obviously they're not new, but what have we not done? What have we have always shown how the police has gone out into the communities, right? That is not uncommon, but what we rarely show is sitting down and having that dialogue, understanding, right? When I see justice, when I am open and comfortable in any situation amongst police officers as well as the community, talking about my concerns, my experiences, and even injustices that may occur to me without any replications or retaliation because of that. When that is open, when we're able to talk like that, when you're able to empathize and able to reflect, history will tell you where we're at, where we were, and where we are at, and where we will be. Right? We continue to squash some of the things that are going on in our neighborhoods as well as in the police department. Police officers, we have a tough job. We get paid to go to negative things on a constant basis. We should be able to talk amongst each other about some of those things, how we feel about some of those runs we've been on. We should be able to talk with the community about what made you feel this way, or why did you feel that I was angry, or the way I stood upset you. You know, where does that come from? And we need to have these dialogues. They're not being had. I would love to see that more often. I'd like to see that early stages. And if you're uncomfortable, that's understandable. Unwilling, I think that should be unacceptable, right? I think it should be open and willing to have that dialogue. That is the main key, because my perception of that neighborhood starts from who told me what, right? And if we don't get with understanding that there's no empathy. I cannot empathize with that which I do not know. I don't know anything. Historically, looking at history books, I don't know anything about that neighborhood based off, we're getting a lot of our information off the media, which is false, a lot of it. movies. These are the images that we have. But I want to be able to say, this is how I feel. This is how the people in this neighborhood feel. And we have that open dialogue. It's a safety issue for police officers as well as the people that we serve. Understanding each other, that's a safety issue. The lack of communication, the breakdown thereof, not finding any value in that communication is a serious. That's serious. You know, if you don't find value in a conversation, what does that say? You know, is that equal on the other side as well?
Well, what I want to do is I want to start bring things to a close here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Sergeant Mitchell, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that as far as justice.
I didn't have any more. I just kind of piggyback on everybody else. I know I've said a lot. I got a mouthful. It starts with accountability. I think the community is really thriving for us to be held at the same standard as everyone else. They don't want to hear excuses after excuses, and I just feel like that is what they're asking for. It's just accountability and being held at the same standard.
We just had a wonderful conversation with law enforcement. I wanted to give Sergeant Mitchell as well as Lieutenant Pearson an opportunity for some closing remarks. As we deal with COVID-19, it's an opportunity for us to refresh and enhance and improve our situation when it comes to community police relations. And so could you please offer some parting words after the wonderful, meaningful, candid conversation we just had?
So we talked a lot about history. We talked a lot about the things that we've done. I'm all about action and what we need to do. And it's time for this generation to take the torch. You know, people older than us been doing this for a while. Take the torch by realizing this is a unique time, a time in history that will not happen again for years to come. It is now is the time to redefine the way we do policing. And we know what it started out as. We know it started slavery and capitalism. But now we have the opportunity to be what we want to be as police officers and for the community to have us be accountable for how you want us to be as police officers. And I just want us to know that we can know the history. We need to be aware of the history, but we don't need to keep giving so much authority to it. We need to give awareness to the past, but it's time to go forward. So as we come to a close, we talked a lot about in this discussion. We talked so much about what it is that we did, what it is that the history of how we were formed. We talked about, you know, how we do things. But the reality is people want to know, what are we doing now and what type of action steps are we taking? This is a unique opportunity. Like it may only occur once when I'm alive. Like we really have the opportunity for this generation, the generation behind us, to actually take the torch and define what we want policing to look like. We know it started out as slave catching. We know it has a lot to do with capitalism, but we actually have the opportunity in this time to come together, to actually have dialogue, to not just sit behind this computer screen, but to throw on these masks, sit down at the table and talk about how we change these process, policies, and procedures, and how we make people more accountable, how we become accountable ourselves. That's what I'm really passionate about. It's about changing action. That's going to take some relationships, and that's going to take some shedding of the old to make space for the new. And we got a chance to redefine it, y'all, and that's what I want to do. So thank you so much for letting me be here, and I'm accessible to all who want to speak to me. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Tia. Officially, Lieutenant Pearson, I thank you for your efforts, your passion, and your commitment. And so, Sergeant Mitchell, did you want to add in?
I just wanted to really hone in on this. Me and Lieutenant Pearson, after we got done, we just said we just can't end like this. And we just want the community to see our heart, our passion. We are part of the community. We want to make ourselves accessible. Don't let this conversation end. Don't let these be the type of platforms where we just have them to have them and we don't continue to engage and keep the conversation going. I'm making myself accessible. I know that Officer Gilmer and Lieutenant Pearson that was here tonight are just accessible as I am. So as me being in charge of our community relations unit, I'm opening myself up. My desk line number is 513-352-1485. Call us. Let's have these type of engagements. Let's have these type of conversations so we can move forward. We got to hear from you. But just as much as we hear from you, you got to hear from us. There's always two sides to a story. We're here. We're making ourselves vulnerable. But I want to say, Chris, thank you so much for putting this on. This is where we start at. And it's people like you making yourself available, and the platform that you've been blessed with, using that to bolster up the community and make the change. So I just want to tell you thank you. And to the community, you have a police department that cares about you. I really want you all to know that. And everybody that's on this job that cares about you don't look like you. There are some people that don't look like us that care about you. We have some great leadership. We have a great police chief and our assistant chiefs that strive to make our department better. I just want to hone in on that. Call us. We're here. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you to both of you. We will be here as a resource for our community, and that's including all involved in our community. And so thank you for your involvement in this conversation. More conversations will occur. I want to thank you, all of you, once again for giving up your time and your energy for this meaningful conversation, this candid conversation. We cannot solve everything through a conversation, but through action. Some takeaways I want to address as far as in my closing of this. One, please understand our elected officials in their role in policing. So vote your conscience, vote for those individuals that's going to put in place policies that you want to see in place. Two, I would say accountability is extremely important in deconstructing and dismantling systemic racism. We must be honest. The reality is, idealistically, we want to have officers that have the best intentions, that sees the humanity in all people, regardless of color. But the reality of it is that we don't have that. We have a disproportionate amount of Black and brown individuals who are incarcerated, who have all these interactions with law enforcement. And so we need to do something as far as to correct that change and tide, and just be real about it, that it does exist. And so I appreciate all of you for your commitment to improving things. And the next step, I would say, is we definitely, if all of you or some of you wouldn't mind, I think a conversation between you and members of the community to have another conversation. But it's been said we've had these conversations for quite a bit. What we want is, we want to have change. We want to have improvement. We don't want to have another life to be lost like George Floyd and even Breonna Taylor. We want a greater accountability. We want justice, and so that we can bring peace to our community. Thank you once again for lending your time. And thank you for those that decided to take their time to chime in for this discussion. Please join us with this series continues. We will have conversations about education. We will also have a conversation about voting that will be coming up here soon in August. So please visit us at or I don't have to say the www anymore, but freedomcenter.org, just to see the ongoing programming that we will have as it relates to matters of race, cultural competency, as well as just improving our community and making a commitment to humanity. Thank you very much. Be blessed.